So even though archaeologists have not excavated the actual tomb mound of Shirwangdi, they have excavated around the tomb. And around the tomb, they found things like sacrificial animals, goods, horses, stables, workers' burials, so people who were working on this project, their burials, the bodies of relatives of Shirwangdi, and the bodies of some of his concubines. And they've also found some mutilated skeletons. Now, the most famous part of Shirwangdi's tomb complex is actually less than a mile from his tomb. So over here, these 3 pits. And these 3 pits contain the very famous, what we call today, terracotta soldiers. Basically, Shirwangdi commissioned an entire army to protect him and his grand tomb in the afterlife. In the 3 pits that hold these terracotta soldiers, there are over 8,000 life-size terracotta soldiers. Most of them are painted in polychrome. In addition to these soldiers, they're accompanied with over 10,000 weapons. I'm using this term terracotta. Terracotta is a clay made from the soil of the North Chinese plain and then fired at a pretty high temperature. In the pit that we call Pit 2, Pit 2 has more than 1,400 chariots. Some of these chariots are adorned with gold and silver. In addition to the chariots, there are bronze horses, archers, infantrymen, and cavalry. In Pit 3, there's a small group of elite special forces, again made of terracotta. Now the scale of this operation, not even talking about his main tomb, but just talking about these like guardian figures, these terracotta soldiers, is just like out of control, crazy. The expenses and labor that must have cost. They literally would have needed tons of firewood to fire these figures. The figures would have to be fired between about 950 and 1,000 degrees. Now, there has been some debate on whether these would have been fired in kilns or not, but most scholars believe that they were fired in massive and numerous kilns. So they would not only need large kilns to do this, but they would also need numerous kilns, so that they could fire these at the same time and continue the production. This is just like tons of work. They also use techniques of mass production. They did create some of the sections in molds, so this would help increase the production rate. However, there are parts that are very individualized, and for those parts, it's suspected they did not use molds. The terracotta soldiers in general are about 5'9" in height, and again, they were created in sections, and then these sections would have been put together. Now, when we're looking at these soldiers, we're looking at it a little bit different than they were originally intended. We are looking at them, for aesthetics and to kind of get a view of this culture. But when they were made, they weren't made for us, the living, to enjoy their aesthetics. Rather, they were made for naturalism. They needed to be lifelike because they were fulfilling the role of guarding their emperor in the afterlife. It took over 36 years to build, and some archaeologists suspect that criminals may have been used, like people who were sentenced to hard labor, because they have found things like iron handcuffs and collars. So some of the workers may have been criminals. The presence of these terracotta warriors and other figures actually in the tomb complex, such as like acrobats and such, may replace large-scale human sacrifice. So remember, in the Shang era, they're actually practicing human sacrifice. So kind of the theory here in this period is that instead of actually having this mass sacrifice, the emperor was using these terracotta soldiers as sort of like a stand-in. However, they did practice some sacrifice, just not on this grand level that we saw in the Qin Dynasty and that we're seeing imitated by this terracotta soldier. So we do still find kind of small-scale human sacrifice in this period. Some bodies have been recovered. Now, what can we learn from this tomb complex? Well, of course, we can learn the costume, or the dress, the attire of what these soldiers would have worn. Of course, we can definitely see the power of Shirwangdi. We can see, based on attire and weapons, we can see the rankings of different soldiers. See burial practices. We also see evidence of what this period believed in as far as an afterlife is concerned. Also, something interesting is, of course, that large-scale human sacrifice may not have been okay during this period. It was okay during the Qin Dynasty, but it doesn't seem like it was okay during this period since he's having to make these kind of stand-ins. And, of course, we can also see evidence of techniques, materials used, and technology. Here's just kind of a breakdown of how and why these figures were made. Here's some more images. They're just so breathtaking, the naturalism here. Here's some images that you can see. Here's an archaeologist working to restore this one, but here you can see that paint used, the polychrome paint, and how lifelike they actually do look when they are painted. This is a great image because it shows you some of the different hairstyles used by different soldiers of different rank. And some are more elite, some are more common. You can see all these so individualized and fantastic. Here's just another image of the tomb, or of the pit. A close-up of some of the bodies. And then this one gives you a nice look at the polychrome painting again. Different hairstyles. You can see how naturalistic they've made this terracotta. Here's one of the horse and chariots. Here's a close-up. This is actually from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts a few years ago. They had a terracotta exhibit, and so these are some close-ups of some of the images or some of the objects that they had. Oh, this one's great. You can actually see a lot of the paint. Such vibrant colors. We're really not used to thinking about when we think about cultures from the past. But they loved these vibrant colors, and it seems that that was also an aesthetic during this period.